Brian Winnekins on Real Country 1430 WRDN at the 50th World Dairy Expo. And thank you to our expo sponsors, including DeKalb Asgrow Seeds, Weiser Concrete, Badgerland Financial, Wisconsin Farm Bureau, Mycogen Seeds, Shannon Crop Services, and also Farm First Dairy Cooperative. Joining us right now is Chris Galen with the National Milk Producers Federation. And Chris, well, a whole lot of issues really going on right now, but I know here at Expo, one of the big topics obviously has been the milk prices.
Yeah. We're entering now another year of low milk prices, year and a half really of low milk prices, and it's been difficult for farmers, and I think you see some of that here at the Expo. Things did turn around at the end of the summer. We saw quite an uptick in cheese prices, but now there's been some backsliding on that, and I think right now our forecasts are for better than what we saw 6 to 12 months ago, but probably not as high as it was a month or two ago. I think the challenge is just that we've got a lot of cheese and butter in inventory in the U.S. There's still milk production coming on around the world, and until those trends reverse themselves, it's going to be a real big headwind in terms of us seeing higher prices.
So because of that, obviously, the milk protection program through with the Farm Bill, obviously there's some changes that maybe need to be made with that?
Absolutely, and I think that's been one of our messages this year to Congress. We've got our annual meeting coming up at the beginning of November where we will be talking about it in much greater detail, but we're already putting together some ideas for Congress to look at in how they change the fundamental structure of the margin protection program, Brian. The USDA has made some tweaks that we've asked them to the MPP program, which is fine, but Congress has written into the Farm Bill a lot of the assumptions for what the milk price is, what feed costs are, what the margin premiums are, and so only Congress can change those things. So we're going to have some recommendations for Congress here in short order with the hopes that they can deal with it here in 2017.
With as fractured as everything is, do you really think that's going to happen?
The good news is that there are members of Congress in both parties, in both chambers, in the House and the Senate, that are aware of the stress that dairy farmers are under. We've been delivering that message. It's been delivered in a lot of important areas around the country, including here in the Midwest. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest in helping dairy farmers and, importantly, not waiting for a new Farm Bill to pass to do it, because the current Farm Bill runs through 2018, more than another 2 years, and we don't want to wait that long to make changes in the MPP.
Talking with Chris Galen from National Milk Producers Federation at World Dairy Expo. Chris, we've talked a little bit about this before, the situation in Canada where they're wanting to change the ingredients program of their dairy industry that could adversely affect really New York dairy specific, I mean, really in some respects, but then that could cascade down the rest of the country. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, they call it an ingredient strategy, but really it's keep U.S. milk out of our country as far as what we see the benefit to them of this strategy. So we have been very vocal that whether you're in New York, and actually here in Wisconsin, there are companies that have been selling ultra-filtered milk to Canada's cheese processors in a way that has created a nice market for some U.S. dairy farms and dairy processors. Canada, their dairy farmers don't like that, and so what they're trying to do is implement a new policy that will really disadvantage exports coming from the U.S. We've been very vocal, again, with members of Congress, with members of the Obama administration. Let's raise a stink with Canada so that they don't go forward with this. Right now, the deadline for it has been pushed back through into the fall, and we're hoping that Canada doesn't go through with this because we're really going to continue to raise a stink if they do.
Now, from looking at it from our friends from the north, they would say, now, wait a minute, U.S. dairy farmers, remember MPCs and casein that was coming in and how you guys were trying to fight to get that shut off to the U.S. Well, we're just doing the same thing. It's just different country.
What we're saying is that each country has to be consistent with its trade obligations, either through NAFTA or the World Trade Organization. We did not pass any changes in our tariff structure for casein and MPCs. We would expect Canada not to do that in a way that violates their WTO obligations. And that's been our message to Canada's new government, relatively new premier. And the good news is that our USDA, as well as the U.S. Trade Representative, have been very empathetic to our arguments and have been carrying those to their counterparts in Ottawa.
Talking with Chris Galen from National Milk Producers Federation here at World Dairy Expo. Chris, TPP, we've talked about this. Is there really going to be any movement after the election?
we'd like there to be some movement, and we'd like to have the TPP passed because on benefit it will help on the margins. It will help benefit U.S. dairy farmers. It's not a slam dunk, but it does represent some new net opportunities to export. Importantly, Brian, it also has some language in there on geographic indicators, common food names that will help the U.S. dairy industry in the future, also on some food safety standards. So there's a package of things in TPP that will be beneficial. Now, in terms of the politics, we'll have to see who gets elected in November, and we'll have to see if a lot of this anti-trade rhetoric has been just that, things that you say to get elected, and then you realize you might need to rethink a little bit as you have to govern. I think there's a clear benefit to the overall U.S. economy from TPP, and we're hoping that if not in 2017, where maybe President-elect Clinton or Trump won't do it, but there is going to be this lame duck session of Congress, and perhaps we can, working in it with agriculture and other parts of the economy, muster up enough critical mass to get TPP passed.
Finally, a topic that I recently just discovered here at Expo, talking with some folks from the Wisconsin Milk Marketing Board. Obviously, earlier this year we had coming out from USDA and a lot of other folks, whole milk isn't as bad as it used to be, and the person from the Milk Marketing Board said now she's been out and about, and moms are saying, hey, why aren't we having whole milk then back in school, and what needs to be done? Is this going to have to be something that's going to have to come onto National Milk's radar, even though it's just such a local issue, each school district?
It already is on our radar, and I think this is the case where consumers are ahead of dietary experts and certainly well ahead of the federal dietary guidelines, which is unfortunate, but that's where National Milk comes in. There's been a lot more research in the last 5-10 years that dietary fats generally, and specifically dairy fats, aren't the boogeymen that they have been painted as being for my whole life, more than 50 years. And that is the challenge right there, Brian, is that you've got people in the nutrition policy community who've staked their whole careers on the fact that we need to reduce and eliminate fats from our diets, whether it's animal fats or other sources of saturated fat. And lo and behold, Americans are fatter than ever before, right? And that's not just a coincidence. We have fought a battle against fat, and fat has won in the sense that people are heavier now than ever before, and we have a lot of other diseases as a result. The good news is that there's plenty of evidence now, and we're hearing more about it, that if you use whole milk products, whether it's or whole fat products, whether it's whole milk or yogurts or even cheeses, they don't cause the sorts of cardiovascular problems that they were alleged to cause back 50 or 60 years ago. It's going to take a while, though, I think, for that to be reflected in the federal dietary guidelines, which were just updated here in the last year. But it's going to be a long-term fight to push the battleship in a new direction, and we're going to be there as part of that effort.
And really, is this going to be one of these things where schools and consumers are going to have to direct their school districts? You can't violate the federal guidelines if you're getting funding for school lunch, but to have it just have whole milk and whole milk products like yogurt and that sort of thing offered in the a la carte lines, that's the loophole?
Well, I think we'll have to look at what the loopholes or other opportunities might be. Our first focus is Congress has to pass the Child Nutrition Act. That's an opportunity for us to say that you can have low-fat, flavored milk back in the school lunch line. Right now, if you want to serve chocolate milk to kids, it has to be fat-free. That's a mistake because kids don't like the taste as much as they do of low-fat milk. So we got to walk before we can run on this issue, and it would be great to see 2% and even whole milk, if necessary, in schools and in the school lunch line. It's going to be a long-term evolution, not something that we can make happen overnight.
Chris, a new front, I guess, on that will have to be fought with getting whole milk back into schools and some other issues. Again, thanks for joining us.
Happy to see you, Brian.
Chris Galen with National Milk from World Dairy Expo. I'm Brian Winnekins on Real Country 1430 WRDN.